So I'm down on the floor in Stan Petrosky's front room with his foot in my hand, and you cannot take a phone call with somebody's foot in your hand, so when my phone goes off in my back pocket I let it ring. Stan is 89 and his ankles are a full-time job. Number I don't know anyway. It rings again, same number. Third time, I wedge it against my shoulder and say what I always say, "This is Kim." And a man's voice says, "Mrs. Brody. My name is Owen Pike, I'm an attorney, I'm calling about your father." I said, "My father left in 1984. He said, "I know, he died Thursday morning, and you're the only person in his will." Hi, I'm Sarah. That was Kim, and this is the first episode of her story. A woman who buried a father she had not seen since 1984, and found out at the funeral that he had been keeping something for her the whole time. 12 episodes, one story, let's stay with her. Well, let's go. I got the stocking over the heel. That's the part I remember clearest. Stan is looking at me because my face is doing something, and I am still smoothing that stocking up his calf like a woman with somewhere to be, and this stranger on the phone is telling me that a man I have not seen in 42 years left me a house. Then he said the other part. A house, a business, and the accounts, and did I have somewhere I could sit down? I said I was sitting. I was not sitting. I was on my knees on a braided rug next to a recliner, and there was a smell of the sausage I'd cooked for Stan's lunch, and outside somebody's leaf blower was going. Okay. Let me put myself in the room so you know who's talking. My name is Kim Brody. 52. I'm a home health aide, 17 years, which means I go into other people's houses and do the things their children would do if their children came. Baths, meds, blood pressure, groceries, the toenails nobody wants to talk about. $17.40 an hour. 6 clients on a good week. I rent the top half of a 2-family on Beach Street in Hadley. $8.75 a month, and the radiator in the bedroom makes a sound like somebody tapping a spoon on a pipe, which I have stopped hearing. I drive a Corolla with a bad door seal. My best friend Roz does the same job I do, drives the same kind of car, and eats her lunch in it the same way I do, which is standing up in the parking lot with the door open. That's my life. It's a small one and it's mine, and it was, honest to God, fine. Here's the other thing you need. My mother died last May. Judy. 75, and it was fast at the end, 4 weeks, and I did what I do for strangers except this time it was her, and she let me, which surprised us both. And my daughter and I hadn't spoken in 4 years. Chelsea. 30 now. The fault in that is mostly mine. Her father is in Ohio, sober 7 years, and those two facts sit next to each other for a reason. So the phone rings, and a lawyer says the word father, and I want you to understand that in my house that word had one meaning, and my mother built it herself, brick by brick, over 40 years. He left. That's the whole story I was given. He left in April, when I was 10, and he never called, never wrote, never sent a dime, never asked one single time how you were doing. She said that last part so often it had a rhythm to it. Never asked. Not once. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was there. I sat in that hallway. I saw the phone not ring. What I actually remember of him is 4 things, and I have counted them my whole life like coins. 1. He smelled like furniture polish and cold coffee. 2. He could not sing. And did it anyway, in the car, badly, with commitment. 3. He kept a red pencil behind his ear and he was forever writing numbers on things, the corner of a newspaper, the back of a receipt, the palm of his hand. 4. The Saturday. The Saturday is the one that stayed. April, 1984. There was a van in the driveway that wasn't ours, and my father was carrying boxes out of the garage, and my mother stood at the kitchen window with her arms crossed and did not go outside. I sat on the porch step because I understood that something was happening and I did not understand what. He came up the walk in his coat and he crouched down so he was under me, looking up, which is a thing tall people do with kids, and he said, "I'll call you Sunday." He was a man who said things like that in a normal voice. Not a big goodbye voice, a Sunday voice. Then the van went down Sycamore and around the corner by the Lutheran church, and I sat on that step until my mother came out and said I was letting the flies in. Sunday came. I sat by the phone in the hallway, we had one of those, on a little table with a drawer full of pens that didn't work, and I sat there until dinner. It didn't ring. Next Sunday I sat there again, but not as long. Third Sunday I only checked twice. You learn fast at 10, that's the part people don't say. Kids are efficient. Give a kid 3 Sundays and they'll build a whole belief system out of it and carry it to 52. So no, when a lawyer called me about my father, I did not cry. I asked him to spell his own name twice, and I wrote it on the back of a Meals on Wheels flyer with a pen I stole off Stan's TV tray, and then I finished my shift, because Stan had a 2 o'clock and his son calls at Christmas, and that's it, so if I leave, nobody comes. In the car afterward I put both hands on the wheel the way you do at a green light, and did not start the engine. Then I called Roz, who answered with her mouth full, and I said, "My father died." And Roz, who has known me 19 years, said, "Kim. Which one?" That's how much of a nothing he was in my life. My best friend had to check. The lawyer's office was in Marlow. 2 hours north, up past where the highway quits, and it's all 2-lane and hay bales and a billboard for a place that sells sheds. I had never been to Marlow in my life. I want that on the record because I've thought about it 100 times since. He was 2 hours away. 2 hours. I drove farther than that for a certification class in March. I called out of my Thursday clients and I went. Owen Pike's office is in a converted house on Cedar Street, between a tax preparer and a place that engraves trophies. Sozebi 38, tie already loosened at 11 in the morning, and he had a container of leftover pasta open on his desk, which he did not apologize for, and I liked him for that. He put a folder in front of me and turned it around so it faced me, which is a small thing that tells you a person has done this before with people who are wrecked. Raymond Hollis. 78. Died Thursday morning at his place of business, and the woman who worked for him found him at 10 after 9, sitting on his stool with his glasses in his hand. Heart. The kind where they tell you, he probably didn't know. He came in 2018 and did all of this in one afternoon, Pike said. Will, funeral, the whole thing. Most people take 3 meetings. Then he read it to me, because I asked him to. I couldn't make my eyes go down the page in order. The house at 41 Larkin Street, here in Marlow, paid off. The building at 214 Main, which is a storefront with an apartment over it, also paid off. The contents of the business, which the insurance had at $240,000 retail, and Pike was careful to say that retail and what a thing actually sells for are 2 different animals. The checking account. A brokerage account with $362,000 in it. A retirement account with 74. I said, out loud, in that office, "That's not right." Because how does that happen? How does a man carry your name around for 40 years on paper and never once dial 7 digits? Because it isn't. You have to understand what that number does to a woman who has been doing arithmetic in a Kroger parking lot for 30 years. I have skipped my own dentist for 2 years running. There is a coffee can in my cabinet with the property tax money for my landlord's garage because I trade him yard work for the difference. And a man I could not have picked out of a lineup had $400 and some thousand and my name on all of it. Pike explained the parts that would be less fun. Taxes come out of the retirement money as it's paid, and there's a 10-year clock on it. Property taxes and insurance on 2 buildings don't stop just because a man does. Probate takes months, it's public, anybody who wants to can walk into the courthouse and read what's in it, and would I please write that sentence down somewhere, because it was going to matter. Then he took his glasses off, which lawyers do when they're about to be human. He never mentioned you, he said, in 8 years, not once, not a story, not a photograph. He just put your name on everything and made me repeat it back. I asked if there was a letter. He said no. He said he'd asked, at the time, whether Ray wanted to leave a letter of explanation, because people usually do, and Ray said, and Pike read it off his own notes from 2018 because he'd written it down, "She's got nothing of mine to be sorry about. Just make sure it lands. Make sure it lands." I sat with that in a chair with a torn arm while a man ate pasta. Then Pike said there was one more thing, and his voice changed. He said a woman had called his office 3 times since Friday, Sabrina Vance. 29 years old. She said she was Ray's fiancé, that they'd been together, and she wanted to know when the store was being turned over to her, because Ray had told her it would be. I said I'd never heard of her. He said he figured. He said she'd also called Heartlines, the funeral home, and told them the service was being changed. That's how I found out that a woman I'd never met was at that moment planning my father's funeral. We went over there together. Heartlines is on Main, 4 doors down from the store, and it smells like carpet shampoo and cough drops. And there was a young woman at the desk with her phone out, showing the funeral director a photo layout, saying the word celebration. She was pretty in that way, where everything is on purpose. White jacket in June. Nails like little candy shells. And she was talking about a slideshow, and a reception at a bar called the Rusty Nail, and a live band on the deck, and how Ray would have wanted people to be happy. The funeral director, whose name is Doug and who has the personality of a lamp in the best way, looked at me. Just looked, with his eyebrows up 1/8 of an inch. I said, "I'm his daughter." She turned around and she looked at me, top to bottom, the whole inventory, coat, shoes, hands. And she said, "He didn't have a daughter." Doug set a folder on the counter and opened it, and inside was Ray's own handwriting, from 2018, prepaid, signed, 4 lines, graveside only, 20 minutes, no longer. No eulogy from anybody who has to read it off a paper, no flowers. Put what you'd spend on flowers in the register and give somebody a good deal on something. I read it twice. That last line took the wind out of me, and I couldn't have told you why yet. Sabrina said Ray had changed his mind about all that. Doug said, in the flattest voice in the county, that changing your mind is something we do in writing, ma'am, and that the next of kin has the say, and the next of kin was standing right there. I want to be honest about what I felt, because I've thought about it a lot. It was not triumph. I did not know that man. I had no more business burying him than the mailman did. But he had written it down, in his own hand, in the way a person writes when they know exactly what they want, and expect to be argued with, and I have spent 17 years being the person who makes sure old people get what they actually asked for. So I said, "We'll do it the way it says." Saturday. 10 in the morning, graveside. There were 11 of us. I counted, because I count when I'm nervous. 11, plus Doug and the man with the machine that lowers things, who stood back by the truck with his hands folded. I knew none of them, and every one of them knew exactly who I was, which is a specific kind of naked. There was a woman about my age in a green coat and work boots, and she came right at me across the grass with her hand out. Deanie Palco. 22 years behind that counter with him, she said. And she's the one who found him Thursday, and she said that, plain, no drama, the way you'd tell somebody where the bathroom is. She had a Kleenex balled in her other hand that she never once used. There was an old woman with a walker, Dot Meacham, 82, who sells her late husband's things through the store on consignment and comes in Thursdays to knit by the window because her house is quiet. There were 4 or 5 men in sport coats that didn't match their pants, and they turned out to be dealers, other people in the same business from other towns, and one of them had driven 3 hours. There was a man in his 40s in a work jacket, standing off to the side by himself, fingerless gloves in June, watching me instead of the casket. That was Curtis. I didn't know that yet, and way at the back, near the fence, there was an old man in a gray suit that fit him in 1990, holding his hat, who I did not recognize for a full 10 seconds, because you don't expect your mother's husband to turn up at a stranger's grave. Walt. My stepfather, if you want to use that word for a man who married my mother when I was 30, he didn't come up. He stood at the fence line the entire time and he left before it was over, and I watched him go and I thought, that's odd, and then I thought about it exactly no more, because that is when the white jacket arrived. Sabrina came in 12 minutes late, in sunglasses, on the arm of nobody, with her phone in her hand. She walked to the front. Not to the side, to the front, where the daughter stands, and she put her hand flat on the casket and left it there for a count I estimated at 8. Doug did his 20 minutes, and it was decent. Then, because there was no eulogy allowed, something happened that I have not been able to shake. One of the dealers cleared his throat and said, I bought a Hoosier cabinet off Ray in '96. He knocked $40 off because the hinge was wrong and he wouldn't let me pay full for a thing with a bad hinge. Then the next fellow said, he sold me a box of Bakelite for $11 and it was worth $200 and he knew it, and he said, you drove all this way. And they went around like that. 7 or 8 of them. Every one of them a thing he sold and what he charged. That was the eulogy. A bunch of men standing in wet grass, pricing a man. Deanie went last and she said, he never once lied to a customer about an item, not once in 22 years. That's rarer than the item. I did not have one to add. I had a heel of a memory about furniture polish and a phone that didn't ring, and standing there I understood that 11 strangers had more of my father than I did, and had gotten him for free. Then Doug said we'd conclude, and Sabrina took her sunglasses off. She said, I just want to say something. She said they'd been together 10 months, and he was the love of her life, and that people were going to say things about her but she didn't care. Then she put both hands flat on her stomach and held them there, in case anybody in the back was slow. And I'm carrying his baby, she said. So this isn't over for me, it's just starting. And I know he'd want us to have the store, because he told me 100 times, this is going to be yours. Now. I have been in rooms where somebody's grandmother stops breathing. I know what a room sounds like when it doesn't know what to do. Nobody looked at her, everybody looked at their shoes, except Deanie, whose chin came up about 2 inches, and except Curtis, at the edge, who was watching me, still me, not her, with an expression I did not have a name for yet. I did the math standing there, because that's what I do. He was 78. She's 29. Fine. Men do that, it's not a crime, it's not even rare, but 10 months of a great love, and he did not tell his lawyer in 2018 or any time after, and he did not change one line of a will he wrote with a pen in one afternoon. I didn't say any of that at a graveside. There is a way to be, at a graveside, even for a stranger. What I said was, it's 10:20, he asked for 20 minutes. Sabrina looked at me like I'd slapped her, and honestly, in her world, I had. Owen Pike had come, in the same suit, and he stepped up next to me, and he said it to the 11 of us, in a voice like a man reading a parking notice. For anybody who needs to know. Mr. Hollis left a will. It's being filed Monday. Mrs. Brody is his daughter, she's named in it as personal representative, and until the court says otherwise, anything to do with the house, the building, or the business goes through her. Not through anybody's phone calls. Then he thanked everybody for coming, because he is a polite man. Sabrina got into a car with somebody I couldn't see, and as it pulled off she put her window down and said, sweet as pie, you didn't even know him. Which was true. It was the truest thing said over that grave all morning, and she got it for free too. Deanie came up while they were folding the chairs and put a set of keys in my hand. 3 keys on a ring with a brass tag worn smooth. Front door, back door, and the little one, she said. And she didn't say what the little one was for. She said, you should see it before somebody tells you what it is. Main Street in Marlow is 4 blocks long, with the Flag hardware store, a diner, the funeral home, an insurance office, and a place that fixes vacuums, which I did not know was still a job. I parked across the street and got out and looked up. The sign runs the whole width of the building, and it's hand-painted, and it's old, gold letters, black shadow, the paint gone chalky the way paint goes when it's been in weather for a few decades. Hollis and Daughter Antiques. and under that, in smaller letters, established 1986. I stood in the middle of Main Street. There was no traffic to speak of, and even if there had been, I don't think I would have moved. 1986. He left us in April of '84, 2 years. It took him 2 years to open a store and put me in the name of it. Deanie had come across from the diner with a styrofoam cup in each hand, and she handed me one and stood next to me and looked up at the sign like it was new to her too. I said, "Who's the daughter?" And she said, "Honey, there's no son, there's no partner, there's no wife. There's you." It's been that sign since the day he hung it. First week I worked there, some fella came in and asked if the daughter was around, and Ray said she doesn't work here, and the man said, "Well, when's she in?" And Ray said she isn't. I said, "He could have called." Deanie said, "I know it." She didn't try to explain him. I want to say that for her. In 22 years she'd built a whole set of opinions, and she kept every one of them in her mouth and let me have the sign by myself. The key turned like it wanted to. There's a brass bell over the door on a curl of metal, and it rings a half-step flat, and it's the first thing I heard inside that building, and I hear it in my sleep now. It smells like furniture polish and cold coffee. I got 2 steps in and stopped, one hand still back on the knob, because that smell got to me before anything else in the building did. 42 years. It came up out of the floor of that store and put a 10-year-old girl on a porch step in April. Inside, it's clean. That's the thing nobody expects. Antique stores in your head are a mess. This one had aisles, everything with a tag, everything priced, everything with a little card in his red pencil telling you what it was and where it came from. A stack of blue ball jars, a wall of clocks, none of them running. A treadle sewing machine with the belt off. A church pew with a hymnal on it. His stool was behind the counter with the seat worn shiny in a shape. On the counter, his glasses, folded. A mug, dried out. A roll of tags and the little gun you use to shoot the strings through them. And a cardboard clock sign, the kind with the movable hands, that said, "Back in," and then the hands. Deanie hung the closed sign for me and stayed by the door, and I saw it there next to the register. A tag. One of his, craft paper, string through the hole, laid out flat on the counter like it was waiting on somebody. And in red pencil, in the handwriting from those 4 lines at the funeral home, it said. And under my name, 3 letters, NFS. I picked it up and turned it over, and there was nothing on the back. I held it up and I said, "What's this mean, this part?" Deanie came over and looked, and something moved across her face and settled. She said, "That's how he marked a thing that isn't for sale." Not for sale, he had a room of them. I said, "A room of them." And she looked up at the ceiling, at the floor of the apartment over the store, and she said, "You've got a little key on that ring, hun, that door's at the top of the stairs. He's kept it locked since I've worked there, and I've never once been up." It was 6:20 on a Saturday evening in June. I had a 2-hour drive and a client at 7 in the morning, and I have never in my life been the woman who does the dramatic thing at 6:20 on a Saturday. I locked the store. I drove home with that tag on the passenger seat, and it slid off at the stop sign by the shed's billboard, and I put my hand out for it at 45 miles an hour like it was a kid. I got to Beach Street a little after 9 and I stood in my kitchen and ate cold rice out of the pan over the sink, because that's dinner when nobody's watching. Then I put his tag under the magnet on my refrigerator, next to Stan's medication schedule and a coupon for oil changes that expired in March. K. Hollis, not for sale. 9 days that man had been dead, and that was the first thing he'd said to me since Sunday. That was episode 1 of Kim's story. She walked into that store thinking she had inherited a building, and walked out holding a tag with her own name on it in a dead man's handwriting. Episode 2 is on the way, and while you wait, tell me down in the comments, what do you think is behind that locked door at the top of the stairs? I read every one. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and the whole story lives in the season playlist right below. See you in episode 2.